This session today will be on how to create a submittal in Oasis. It was actually one of the first two pieces of the system that we created back years ago, and has been used quite often, and many changes have been made over the years. Before we get into this actual creating a submittal, there are some things to take a look at our surrounding submittals as you start loading spec sheets from manufacturers and then generating your own submittal from a bill of material. On your home screen, again, depending on what your role is, you can see submittals, and in the recent items button, and I'll show you how to gain access to that, but you'll see a list of submittals that you've been working on section in here. Kind of a quick way to find a submittal maybe you were working on recently, to not have to search for it. Just find it in this list, click on it, and continue with your submittal. To get access to that in your Oasis, go to, on your home screen, go to File and Preferences. And by the way, File and Preferences is the way you change any screen in Oasis, no matter what it is. But from the home screen, go to File and Preferences, and you'll see a section in here with a checkbox called Submittals. And that's what causes, if you'll check that box, that's what causes it to show, be able to view submittals, the ones that you were working on from the Recent Items tab. Also, you have a submittal section down here in the system where you can see a list of submittals that you've done. You'll also have copies of those submittals in your Attachments tab of the quote or an order. A submittal can be created from a quote or bill of materials, or from a order bill of materials, either one. But this submittal section will show a list of those submittals that have been created in your system. Now, to get set up to create submittals, of course, you have to have spec sheets from various manufacturers. Now, spec sheets can be loaded as you go. You can load them up initially, or you can, some manufacturers will have us manage spec sheets, and they may be available to download directly into your Oasis, but otherwise you'll probably, what you do now, go to a manufacturer's website and find that spec sheet and save it, download it to your desktop or to a folder, and then drag and drop it into Oasis. So we'll kind of touch on that part of it as well. In your manufacturer setup, there is an item in your contact information tab that you may find handy to set up. In your contact information, if you'll, over here in your phone, email, and other numbers, if you'll type in www there, and then put the URL address of that manufacturer, that will create a, you might say, a quick key in several sections where you can make, once you touch it or click it, you can, Oasis will open up a web browser and go straight to that factory's website. So it kind of saves a step or two, if you will, getting to the cut sheet that you want. So you set that up, that should help you. All right, so let's go to the manufacturer section, and how do you get a cut sheet in here? There is a price in here, the pricing, how you receive pricing from manufacturer. This is where price files are stored. Just got some sample data in here that I've collected over the years just to show on demos and training sessions like this, what a price file looks like. Having a price file in the system is not required to do submittals, but it may help you find the correct part nomenclature. to create submittals. Your cut sheet section is kind of like your library for storing spec sheets in the system. So when you create a new manufacturer, in fact, I'll just go ahead and create a new manufacturer in the system just so you can see what this looks like. So we'll create a manufacturer called, we'll just call it MFG lighting, for instance. So, and we'll make that the manufacturer name and ID both, and we of course could put an address, terms, and all kinds of things in the system, including freight allowances in here. Set a manufacturer up just like you normally would any other manufacturer. Even do minimum parts order amounts, that type thing. But anyway, you get those set up in the system, and once you create a manufacturer entry in your system, it also puts them in the list here of manufacturers, and make sure I got that in the system, and it looks like it didn't want to cooperate there. So let me make sure that I get my manufacturer. We call it MFG lighting. So let me make sure that I've got it listed in here. Yep, I do. Listed in here, and we don't want to make any changes. So let me go back to my cut sheets area and make sure that it's in here. There it is. All right, now when you create manufacturers, and there's probably some on this call or on this session that don't have cut sheets set up in the system. So once you create a manufacturer, it's going to give it a name, and it's when you click on it, it's going to say empty underneath it because I haven't created any place to store spec sheets. So what's required in Oasis is kind of like a paper catalog, if you will. So you'll create the catalog, is what we call it, and you right click on the manufacturer name, hit new catalog, and it'll pop up this window to give it a new name. So I'm just going to label it for right now 2022 catalog, for instance. So click OK, and now I have a catalog. So in most catalogs, you'll have sections to put different things in, spec sheets in this case. So for Oasis, you will need to create one section, or you can create multiple sections. And to do that, you'll simply right click on the catalog, add a new section, and you call it whatever you want. I'm going to call this one LED, and notice it creates a section. Now I have a place to store spec sheets from a manufacturer's website. Now I may scroll up here and just show you one where I have created multiple sections to put spec sheets in. So I created a January 2019 catalog and added sections for exit, LED, troughers. You can set this up however you want to, and load those in as needed. Again, I have some test data here, so kind of ignore the particular names, but that's what the structure of this looks like. So now how do I get spec sheets loaded in to my Oasis so I can use it to create a submittal set? So how you do that is probably what you're doing now. You go out to a factory's website and you grab the spec sheet that you need, download it, save it to your desktop or to a folder on your server, that type thing, and then you're able to drag and drop that into Oasis. So kind of what I've done here is I have a file folder on my machine where I have pulled down or downloaded spec sheets from manufacturers. And again, it's just a placeholder. So I'll find the spec sheet that I downloaded and just simply highlight it. And again, this is the manual process for loading them as needed as you go, or you can do this downloading them initially as well. So take that spec sheet and just simply drag and drop it into your LED catalog or section in that catalog. And Oasis will open that window up and it will show you what it found, what it downloaded, and you can make this bigger if you want to. The idea here is just to make sure that you grab the correct one. So just make sure that that's the one that you intended to load into Oasis. You also have the opportunity here at this point to change the name if needed, because Oasis, when it looks for a spec sheet, it's going to look at this name that you gave it, and that's actually the file name. So in some cases, you'll get from factories a name like page 1 or something like that. So you may want to modify this to give it the correct name so that when Oasis looks at that part number in your quote, it knows what it's looking for as far as a spec sheet. So change the name if needed. Once you're happy with that, click OK, and the system will also let you preview what the submittal or what this sheet would look like in a submittal generated from Oasis. So this is what it does. It centers it inside this window. And what you're looking for here is just to make sure that everything looks correct. Make sure all of that looks good. All of this banner information we'll talk about a little later. All of this is automatically updated or data put in it from the quote or order that you're creating this submittal from. So we'll talk about that as we go. But if it happens to be a spec sheet that is a landscape, then you may want to use this button up here, landscape, to let the system know that, hey, this spec sheet, you need to turn and make it landscape. So it will adjust it and make sure that that spec sheet fits into this window. And you can move it around. You can do some scaling if you want to, but it should. We've pretty much accounted for all the possible ways that manufacturers create PDFs. So if you do find one that's abnormal, just send it to us. Let us know that it's not working right for Oasis, and usually we can adjust it, figure out what the issue is. So that's the spec sheet manually loading. Once I'm happy with it, I save and close, and it's now in the system ready for me to use to create a submittal set. Okay, so that's how you load them manually. Now there is a what we call a web spider for Oasis that will actually you can actually point it to a factory's website. So I right-clicked on my LED section there and clicked Add from URL, and I can actually put in the manufacturer's URL address and go and have Oasis scan that factory's website, finding spec sheets to be able to pull down. And it will stage them for you and let you pick and choose the ones that it finds. Now, the problem with it is manufacturers have those spec sheets on their site in multiple different ways. They are sometimes buried behind firewalls, so it may not work for every manufacturer. It's just something that we put out there to kind of help with getting those loaded in the system. And like I said earlier, there are some manufacturers that also allow us to manage their spec sheets, and then we can make those available for download into Oasis, and a lot of them are auto-highlighted as well. So we can help with that if you want us to send you a help document on how to do that. So getting them in is the big thing, and then Oasis will kind of take it from there. There are ways to expire those spec sheets to kind of remind you to go and make sure you have the latest spec sheet for that part available. and we call it expiration, 6-month expiration. Usually you can adjust that as needed, but again, it's a way just to make sure that you're always with the latest spec sheet. All right, so I have some spec sheets loaded into my system. Once you start getting those loaded into your system, real quick, back over here on your home screen, down here at the bottom right, it allows you, once you start populating those, it will let you now, if you just happen to need to view a spec sheet for some reason, you can actually type in the manufacturer's name here from your manufacturers that are loaded in the system, and type in a part number. And if you have price files loaded, you'll see this menu pop up. Otherwise, you just type in the part number. And if that spec sheet has been loaded into the system, you can actually click the find there, and it will display that spec sheet for you on your home screen. So you can take a look at it. Doesn't matter how many pages it is, it'll let you view it from that screen. You can also do this when you're in a quote. We'll show you that when we get to a quote. All right, for our training purposes here today, we're going to assume that people have understand about creating a quote or an order. Like I said, an order, either one. The idea is having a bill of materials here. And you want to make sure that you have a quantity, manufacturer, part number, and pricing in order to do a quote. Kind of the same thing for creating a submittal. OASIS wants you to have an adequate number of adequate data in here to generate a submittal set. So once you've started entering part numbers in your quote and maybe send it out, at some point you may need to do submittals. So to do a submittal, and by the way, while you're in the quote, I'll just show you this as well. If you were to want to see a spec sheet while you're in the quote without creating submittals, you can actually right click on that part number and a menu will pop up, drop down. And one of those options down here says create specification page. And if you'll click that and that spec sheet is in your system, it will do the same thing like I mentioned earlier, just populate that, pop up that spec sheet and let you view it from the quote screen as well. All right, so just know that those tools are there. So now I need to create a submittal. To create a submittal, you'll go up to File, New, and New Submittal Like, meaning like this bill of materials. So click that. And I made some changes there, so it's asking me about those. But you'll get to this kind of a staging screen for creating the submittal. You'll see some things up in the header area of this asking what you want to create. And you can do things like accessories, for instance. Maybe you have an accessory line on your quote. Maybe it's a wire guard, something like that. You can decide here whether you want a page, a submittal, one of your submittal pages to show that wire guard page. If you do, most people don't. So those are by default unchecked. Courtesy quote line on your quote, if you want that to generate. Maybe you have a manufacturer that called miscellaneous or something like that, where you put miscellaneous spec sheets in. You can create a courtesy quote line, freeform the manufacturer, and then grab the spec sheet that you want from the miscellaneous manufacturer and drag and drop it into your submittal if you want. If you have a kit and component set up on your quote, you can tell the system here, do I want to roll up those component lines into one kit line and just do a submittal for it only, or it listed on one page, if you will, for the submittal. Same thing for accessories. Same thing for zero quantity lines. If you do have a line on your quote that has a zero quantity, do you want it to be a part of your submittal package as well? So you have that options, and then some other things to show or not to show. Now, by default, Oasis is going to allow you the option here to not print certain lines as a part of your submittal or not. And these are all checked because it assumes that I'm going to do all the lines on this quote. So you have the opportunity here to uncheck a line, and you also have the opportunity at the end. I'll show you where you can make that decision not to show a line as well. So if you were to do have to do a resubmittal, make a change, and then print the submittal again with those changes, then again, that gives you the option to print or not print either way. So we're going to assume that we want to create submittals for all the lines on this quote, and we're going to hit create. And it's going to bring us to what we call our submittal editor. Now, the submittal editor is where I do all of my work as far as highlighting, creating things for the submittal package. And you'll see all of this in yellow, all of these sheets. What's happened here is, since I've already been using this system for a while, it's going to, in fact, let me just delete some of these to show you what it would look like in some cases. If you're new to creating submittals and you're just now loading spec sheets, then this is not going to show all of your lines are going to look like this line. They're going to be blank. So you have kind of a clean slate to start with. Now, since I've been using this system for quite a while, I have put a lot of spec sheets in here. And one of the neat features of Oasis is that it learns as you go. So every submittal that you do, the system will learn those spec sheets matching those part numbers and the highlights that you've done on those as you go. So we'll talk about learning here in just a minute. So what's happened now is that anything that has been learned in the system, or the part number exactly matches a spec sheet that I've loaded into the system, then it's going to find that and bring it into your submittal editor. So this CFR6V part number, it found it by either, again, matching or I've learned, and it pulled in this 2-page cut sheet for me. It did the same thing on this CFR18V, and that was likely just a variation of the same base spec sheet, okay? So could have been a CFR base spec sheet, and it could be used for 6 volt, 18 volt, 12 volt, or whatever. But things have to be highlighted separately on those to match that part number. But again, it uses the same base spec sheet. Now, this line here, this was a long several page spec sheet that it went out and got and brought into the system here. And again, it doesn't matter how many pages the spec sheet is, it will load those in there. Now, when you are starting out, or you've done some work, but you don't have all of those in the system. In fact, I'll just delete this bottom one, delete these pages as well, so that we'll have to do a little bit of work here to create a submittal set. Each one of these is a page from that spec sheet set, okay? So what I'm doing here, and by the way, this is also your catalog list of manufacturers over here on the left side of this screen, and it's narrowed down to only the manufacturers that are on this particular quote or on this bill of materials. So it's narrowed it down, but down here at the bottom left, you see a little checkbox that says filter manufacturers. So that's what it's done. It's only showed me the manufacturers that are on this quote. But if I uncheck it, it opens up the catalog and shows me all my manufacturers. And I'll show you why this would be helpful here in just a second. But otherwise, we're going to just deal with these manufacturers. Now, I'll show you about the highlighting here in just a second, but let's find all of our spec sheet sets. Now, what it found here, it didn't find anything in my Buck manufacturer that started with WEP BEL 107. Didn't find anything matching that. So either that spec sheet is not in my system yet, or the base spec sheet is there, but it hasn't learned any variations, adders, additions, configured part numbers, that type thing for that particular part number has not been learned, so it didn't find it. So I've got to go get it. Now, I can stop here and just move this over to the side and go out to the factory's website, find the spec sheet I'm looking for, download it, save it to my desktop, and then drag and drop it in right here in this screen in the manufacturer. Works just like it did just a minute ago. Just drag and drop it in here, and then I'm ready to go. I can just drag and drop it over here on that particular line. Now, since this is a Buck manufacturer, I'm going to actually go to Buck as the manufacturer, and where did Buck go? Not seeing it. It didn't load Buck manufacturer, so we'll just go over here and find it. Yeah, not sure it's supposed to show up there, but anyway, we'll go to Buck manufacturer and we'll look in here to see if maybe this is a WEP base cut sheet that we know is part of that configuration. So I'll look in my catalog, and sure enough, there it is, the base cut sheet WEP-BEL, and I just need to highlight the additional adders or options that belong to that spec sheet for this part number. So to add that spec sheet to my submittal editor, I'll just simply highlight it there and drag and drop it over here to where it says drop here, and it pulls in this case it's a one-page spec sheet. Okay, so I found it, pulled it in, and then the same thing for this Creed manufacturer ZR22. So I find my Creed manufacturer, and again, if it's not in here, I just simply stop or minimize this screen, go to the website. And by the way, if you want that quick key to fire up your web browser and go to that site, since I've loaded that for the manufacturer, I can click this www button over here, and it'll actually open the browser for me and go to that site and make it easier for me to find that particular spec sheet and get it dragged and dropped in here. So whatever happens there, or either way, it looks like that ZR22 spec sheet is in my catalog now. And if I want to see how many pages it is, you can actually click on it and it'll open it up and show you that it's a 3-page spec sheet set. So I'm going to drag the whole thing in here. So again, with my mouse, I just drag and drop it, same place, and it pulled in all 3 pages. Okay, so I've got all of my spec sheets found. And by the way, if you have a long one here, or any of them for that matter, and there are certain of these pages that you do not need, you don't want to print those out to send them off, you can actually, there's an X there on each page. So if I don't need page 8 for some reason, I can just simply exit out, and it'll ask me if I want to delete it, and I'll just simply delete it because I don't need it. So you can do that anywhere on this submittal set, is to remove any page that you don't want to print. So from here, I'm ready to start going through here and doing any highlighting that I need to do. So I'm going to open up ABC page 1, CFR 6V. And to do that, I just double click on what looks like a page there, and it opens up my spec sheet ready for me to do any highlighting or marking it up however I want to. On your toolbar up here at the top, you have a highlighter. That on the toolbar, you can draw circles, ovals, lines, draw arrows. I'll touch on all of those, and even delete or erase work that you've done and start all over, if you will. So I'll click on my highlighter, and by default, Oasis will draw a box. And I'm just going to draw a box around that CFR 14. You'll have your part number at the top up here and at the bottom. So as you're doing this marking up, you'll be able to see your complete part number and know what to highlight. So you'll just go through here and highlight whatever you need to highlight to match that part number as you go across here. Now you can do highlights, you can do colored highlights if you want to. Some people like yellow as their standard. So anytime that you create a box, let's say, and put your cursor inside that, you can double click on it and it'll open up the editor or properties window. And it gives you the ability to change the highlight color. So I can change that color if I want to, and it'll change that color to yellow. That's not a very dark yellow. So let me open that up and change that to a little darker yellow so you can see what that looks like. And if you'd rather do them that way from now on, you can actually, as you make these, you can make that particular color background your default, set as default. You can even change the border width if you want and make it your standard. You can change the font size of any text that you put in there. We'll do that next. Set that as the default now. So now anything that you do in the future will have that same font. And you can take these, adjust them, move them around, make it look like you want it to look. But just go through there and highlight, create as needed. Again, you can do circles if you want to. So any circle that you want to create, or oval, I want to highlight what's in there, maybe draw any arrow that you want to. You can point to certain things if you want, change how that looks, put other ones in here. It's kind of up to you what you want to do there, but all of those tools are up here on the toolbar. If you do make a mistake of some sort while you've got it highlighted, you can actually hit your delete key or hit the trash can up here and just start all over. Or you want to delete an entire area of highlights, you can actually hit this pointer button, the first button on your toolbar, and just draw a circle or a square around the general area that you want to delete what you've created, and then hit the trash can, and it will delete everything inside that square that you created. So it's a quick way to just erase things and start fresh start, if you will. All right, so highlight what you want. You can even put numbers inside these boxes if you want to just draw a box and type something. You can also create text or add text. I'm going to click on my highlighter here again, and I'm just going to draw a box. And if I want to type in some information there, put text on this, just again, put your cursor inside there, double click on it, and say something like, please specify voltage, for instance. So you can do something like that if you want. Add, change the font size, if you will, bold it, all kinds of things that you can do there. and it will put that text on your submittal. If you want to create a what we call quick clips, same thing as doing a clipboard, storing clipboard notes in Oasis. This is the same thing, but it's in submittal form over here on your right side. So I could create this and I could add it to my clip list. You see, I've already created 2, so I won't create another one there. I've got one that says, please specify voltage, and then the other one for color. So to add those, you just create it and click add, and it'll add it to that list. And then when you're ready to use them, you don't have to create them. You can just click on it. Please specify color is what I clicked on, and I want to put it right down here somewhere. So you can click on that, and it will drop it onto your submittal page as well. So feel free to create those, create additional ones, and then again, I'm marking up this page to match that part number on here. So when you're done, you can either save and close and go to the next page, or if you're still inside that same part number or spec pages, you can click on page 2 and go to page 2, and it will open it up. And there may or may not be anything in here that I need to check or draw arrows to or anything like that, but you can certainly make those additions as well. And now I've opened up those first 2 pages on that first line. So normally I would just go down through here and do the same thing to any additional pages on this submittal set, and just walk through them, view them. Don't have to view them, but most people will do at least initially to make sure everything looks good, and just walk down through here and make your marks or additions to match a particular part number. Let's do the and I'll just make this one bigger, let's say, and there's my other part of that. Move that over a little bit, and then any other additions that you want to adjust, just go through and mark those up. Now, you may have an occasion, I know this, I did this a lot several years ago, where you want to add a page from another, either from another manufacturer. A good example was to add a ballast page from another manufacturer that's not on my bill of materials, but it needs to be a part of this submittal set. So Oasis will allow you to do that as well. So in this case, let's say I have a ballast page that I want to add to this buck line, for instance. I want it to be page 2 to show that ballast page from a different manufacturer that's not on my quote in this case. You can do it however you want to. So let's go up here, and here's my manufacturer called Advice Ballast, and inside here I have a ballast spec sheet, and it is 4 pages long, but I really only want page 4, for instance. So I can highlight just page 4, and I can take page 4 and drag and drop it onto the end of that buck single page spec where it says drop here. So I just drop it right there, and it adds that page to my buck lighting submittal page there. So it has page 1 and page 2. And by the way, if you save this, learn it to use again down the road, I'll talk more about that in a minute. If you've learned it, then the next time that this particular part number shows up in another job, it'll bring in this work that you've already done, this page, and since it's saved or learned that ballast page goes with that part number, it will save that and bring it into a new job as well. So you'll have both of those in here already learned. So that's a quick tip that you might find useful at times. So again, we go through, mark up our pages as needed. Your highlighters, all your information is up here at the top. By the way, you can hide text or different things on here as well. Let's say we want to hide this picture for some reason over here. So to do that, I'll go use my highlighter, check it, and I'm going to draw a box. Basically, let me bring that back up here again. I forgot which one I had up now. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. On any page that you want to, and you want to hide some text, you click your highlighter. And for instance, I'm going to hide this listing section. I don't want to show that on the printed submittal set. So I'm going to draw a box around that whole section there. And I'm going to put my cursor inside of it to where the 4 arrows are that show, and double click and open up my properties window again. And this time, in order to hide that text, I don't want to make this a permanent default setting. I just want to do it this one time. So in this case, I'm going to hit my background color and make it white so that it matches the rest of the submittal. And I'm going to then remove my border. So I zero it out so there's no border. And then I uncheck my transparent box. And by default, of course, you draw a bordered box around something, the inside of it shows through, so it's transparent, but I don't want to do that in this case. So I want my background color white to just cover everything. So I uncheck the box for transparent, I hit OK, and then click out away from it, and now it has essentially removed or hidden that listings paragraph that we were looking at just a second ago. So that's another little tip that you might find useful in creating these submittals. Now, once you're done with all of that, all of these markups and highlights and all of that to match the part number, that's what you're trying to do. You're creating the submittal to send to a specifier generally, to get your items approved on this. So matching this spec sheet set to this specific part number is what you're doing. And then we're going to print it. But before we actually hit print, one of the things that Oasis does is learns as you go. So I recommend most all the time, unless you have a good reason not to, is right before you print, you'll want to click this Learn All button up here at the top. It's also over here on the right side in the blue bar as well. But clicking that Learn All button causes the system to learn that part number matching that spec sheet set with the highlights that you've put on it. And don't worry about it taking up space. It is not going to take up a lot of space. We store the base spec sheet one time, and then all of these saves or learns that you do are only saving the overlays over that base spec sheet. So it's in kilobyte size instead of megs or something like that. So don't be afraid to hit that Learn All button every time that you create a set of submittals. It will help every user in your office by learning. You make what you've learned available to all users in the system, whether it's just displaying the spec sheet that's marked up or whether it's them creating their own set of submittals. So it helps everybody by you clicking that Learn All. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click it, and it's going to pop up this window to tell me what it's learned. So it learned it had 6 updates, and then it goes into detail here on what exactly it's learned. So it may not be, you know, things that you want to read through, but that's your notice that it has learned or updated submittals. And of course, you know that one base cut sheet could have 200, 300, 400 different variations of part nomenclatures from the same base cut sheet. So it may learn lots of variations of that same spec sheet as you go. All right, so now we're at the point where we're ready to start the print process. And up here in the header, it will bring over everything from the quote or the order that you created this from. If you did forget to put something on here, like location, city, state, you're welcome to fill it in kind of in here on the fly. I'm just going to type in the city, state. The bid date, that comes from the quote that it was created from. And then your submitted on date is today's date that you created this submittal set. Now, on your or from your quote or from your order, when you create a submittal, it's going to change the status of your quote from wherever it's at, new, quoted, whatever that is. Once you've done a submittal, it's going to assume that you want to change the status of this quote to submitted status. So you've probably seen that already in the quote screen, but it will change the status of it to submitted. All of this header information will also appear on your submittal cover letter if you choose to print a cover letter. So there is also a notes tab, just like you would have on a quote. Remarks you can put on your submittal. They go up above the bill of material, wherever a bill of material is printed, it's going to go above that bill of material, and then your notes area here is going to go down below the bill of material. So you'll have places to put notes and remarks on your submittal set. And then your attachments tab, those of you who are already familiar with it, it's like having an electronic manila folder. And inside the quote attachments tab, you'll see this submittal editor in there. And we do that so you can always go back into this submittal editor. Maybe something didn't get approved or something you have to change or swap out. It lets you open this back up and make any changes that you need to make, and then resubmit it or resend it from the system. So it always stores this in your attachments tab. All right, so let's start the print process. And of course, you know, you can also drag and drop anything you want to into your attachments tab as well. All right, so to start the print process or to send this to a customer, or to, if it's a large submittal and you have maybe a box account or some cloud hosting option where you put submittals at, you can save a link or create a link for this to send to your customer as well. I don't think I have that option showing on my screen, but it is available as well. So let's start the process of sending or printing. You can hit print at the top or at the bottom, either one. You'll get this window. And what you'll do here is tell the system what you want printed. Cover letter, we'll show that here in just a second. It'll have your logo, job name, specifiers, all of that on it. A transmittal letter is basically you have options checked for, is this for prior approval, different things on there. We'll show you that in just a second. Submittal letter is just essentially a contents page, if you will. Basically only has the bill of material on it. And then of course the checkbox for your pages, they're actually your submittal pages to be printed. And then we can talk about cover type later. There's also an option if you do want to print these out. If you have a printer that has a duplexer on it, you can actually take those submittal pages and print on the back side of it as well. It knows how to handle that, how to divide those up correctly in the system. So that's an option. You also have an option if the customer that you're sending this to has a limited file size that it can accept or receive, you might say, then you can actually set your cap size. I've got this one set to 20 because I'm saying the customer that I'm sending this to cannot receive a file larger than 20 meg. Now, when Oasis knows that, then it will divide, if it's a large submittal over this size, then it will divide it at a good place or a correct place, and it will send more than one email so that your customer gets the entire submittal set. So if you need that, that's there for viewing. Other options are to show quantities or not on your bill of materials, hide description, hide notes, save as attachment. Now, this editor back here in the background, what we did to mark everything up, that is going to store by default. But when it creates the PDF, you need to decide here, do I want to save that PDF that I'm about to send or print in my attachments tab or not? Some people are worried about space that they're taking up on their hard drive by saving each one of these PDFs. If that's not a concern, then you can check that box and it will also save a PDF copy of this specific submittal set that you're about to print or send in the attachments tab. So that's kind of your call whether you want to save those or not. And then lead times, we'll talk about that here in just a second. You can also use the customer's logo to print on these submittal sets instead of yours, but it does require you to have a logo set up in the customer entry in the system. So we'll leave that. There's also the transmittal page that it prints. Here's where you check what it's for, specifications for prior approval or approval or whatever the case is. Check whatever you want there. And then here is the last option you'll have to print pages, print certain lines on this submittal set or not. So if there's any of those that you don't need to print, maybe it's a resubmit, something like that, where you don't need to print all those pages again, you can uncheck the lines that you don't want to print here. So that's your last chance to not print those. And then whoever this is sent to, not required, but if you're sending this specifically to somebody via email, then you can check that box. It will only show customers or specifiers that you have listed on this job. Of course, you can add as you go if need be, but that's where you send it to whomever with their email address. So I'm ready to go now. Got everything in here. I hit print, and like everything else in Oasis, before it gets sent, you'll always have the opportunity to see what you're going to send before you push send. So I'm emailing this with a PDF copy of this submittal set. So it's letting me preview it. This is a cover letter. It'll have all of my logo on it, all of my information, job name, specifiers, all of that. This can be customized. So if you want to customize your cover letter, you can certainly do that if you want to. We can help with that, or you can actually have the XML behind the scenes there form, if you will, if you have somebody that can write XML and actually customize it yourself. So that option is there, but that's a cover letter. And then the next page would be your transmittal letter. That's what it looks like. There's the boxes that we checked. Now you'll notice down here the blue color on the part number. When the customer, and I'll show you this here in just a second, when the customer receives this on the other end, these are somewhat live links. In other words, the customer is looking at this and they want to immediately go down to this ZR22. So they could actually, on your PDF document that you send them, submittal set, they could click on this and it would carry them straight to that page or pages if you want. So that's why that's yellow. And then it will print a transmittal page, I'm sorry, a submittal page, basically the contents, if you want. Don't have to print this either. Basically, it's just the bill of materials, and it shows lead times on here. Lead times are a part of your, I should have showed that just a second ago. Let me do that again. There is a column here called lead times, and let me stretch that out. You can certainly use that, either type in the number of days. I could say 2 to 3 days there for lead time, or again, you can use characters and text. So I could say 4 to 6 weeks on something like that if I wanted to. So that's where the lead time is entered, and then when you print it, just like we did just a second ago, then it would show up on either one of those pages that has the bill of materials on it and shows up in a lead times column. So let me speed ahead to that. That's what it would look like if you choose to use the lead times column. And then again, on just the contents page, if you wanted just to print that or not to print it, either one. Then it gets to your pages. And remember, I said this banner information across the top, that all comes over from the job you created it from, drops in your logo, specifiers, part number, any line notes that are associated with that part number, the type, and even the quote number that this was generated from shows up there. So you'll just walk through those pages, just make sure everything looks correct as you created it. And it looks like I checked the duplexer box because it's printing front and back. But you'll walk through, just make sure everything looks correct and you're ready to go. If you selected a person, and I didn't on this second go around, so you'll need to type in whoever it is that you're sending this to, and then you can type in a note, because I'm going to email this. Oasis will allow me to email it. Please see attached, for instance. So I type that in there, and I'm ready to send it, and it's already got it attached. So from here, I just hit send, and away it goes to my customer. It's going to change the status of it to submitted now, and it has sent it. It has sent it off. So I'm going to open up my email over here, and as soon as that comes through, it will show it. Let me bring my email over here. So this would be just like the customer gets it on their side. So it's an email from you, and it has the PDF, in this case, a 4 meg PDF attached. And I double click on, or the customer double clicks on it, and this is what the customer sees as far as your submittal. So it put in the, this is a cover letter, put my logo in there, all my information, job name, submittal date, specifiers, and again, this can be customized. As they scroll through, and again, I did a front and back page paper print, if you will, so you won't get that blank page normally. Transmittal page, and we check those boxes, and there's your bill of materials, lead times, all of that, and there's your live link to a certain page. So if I wanted to go immediately to this type D buck lighting page, I could simply click on that and it carries me straight to that page. So that's what that looks like. Make sure everything looks correct, or the customer would look through that, and if they had any changes, obviously they would send you those changes back or approval back, whatever the case is. So that's the whole process for creating and sending out a submittal set. Again, you could do this. You can create the PDF and then send or attach the PDF to an email if you wanted to, or simply send it from Oasis. Now, I'm going to save and close this screen just to show you what it did in the actual job. So I'm opening up, back up the quote that we created this submittal from. So there's my quote, and notice it did submittal, so that's why you see the green checkbox there. But in my attachments tab, what I wanted to show here was that it saves, since I did a submittal, I walked through this tree. There's a copy of that email that I just sent out, but there's my submittal editor that it saved in here. And I want to double click on that, and it will open that back up so that I can make any needed changes if I need to down the road. So that's what I mean by it saving that this submittal editor in your attachments tab of the quote that you created this from. And then of course, that PDF that it saved, you'll see that in here as well, and with the email attached to it. And if I want to open that back up to see what I sent, there's the PDF in here as well. So it saves all of that for you. So anyway, that kind of concludes our basics of creating a submittal in Oasis. You'll also be able to do this now if you have the 04 version of Oasis. Things will look slightly different because it is running in a web browser instead of on the desktop like you're seeing it here. But the functionality will be the same for that version as well. It just looks will just look slightly different. So just know you can do the same things in there as well. All right, so if you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to give us a call here, open a ticket, or maybe you're having trouble with some part of this process. Don't hesitate to call or open a ticket to our support team, and we'll help you resolve it so you can create your submittal set. So again, any questions, let us know. Thank you.